I woke to the feeling of icy water pressing against my chest, the kind of cold that steals your breath and sinks its teeth into your bones. For a heartbeat, I thought I was drowning all over again. My hands flailed in the water, instinct dragging me upward toward light and air, and when I broke the surface, I gasped like a newborn taking in its first breath. But the screams around me, the shrill cry of Ivy Shaw, the frantic shouts of villagers on the riverbank, the rushing current pulling at my body, told me this wasn't just a nightmare. No, it was happening again. I had been here before. In my last life, this was the day everything had begun to unravel. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Ivy was a few feet away from me, her pale arms thrashing wildly as she fought against the current. The village bridge loomed just upstream, its wooden posts creaking as water surged around them. The voices above blurred together, calling both of our names. And then I saw him. Marcus Reed. My fiancé. The man I had once thought my future depended on. He was standing on the bridge, his handsome face twisted with indecision. For one breathless moment, his dark eyes locked on mine. I wanted to believe, foolishly, that he would dive for me. That just as he had in my last life, he would reach me in time. But this time was different. Marcus turned. Without the slightest hesitation, he leapt straight toward Ivy Shaw. His arms cut through the water, pulling her into his chest like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Ivy clung to him, her sobbing cries filling the air. Me. I went under. Water filled my lungs, panic clawing at my throat. The last time I had been saved by Marcus. This time as I sank, a shadow loomed above me. A shape rough and clumsy, not the sleek, decisive figure I expected. Strong arms hooked beneath mine, and with a guttural grunt, someone dragged me upward, coughing and choking onto the muddy bank. I rolled onto my side, vomiting river water, my whole body shaking. When my vision cleared, I saw who had pulled me out. Ben Wilder. The village fool. At least that was what everyone called him. His clothes were always torn, his words slurred and halting. He laughed at odd times and stared blankly when people teased him. The children chased him around, mocking the way he stumbled through sentences. I remembered all of that from before. In my last life, Ivy had been the one pulled out of the water by this so-called fool. She had despised him for it, called him her rotten shadow. And eventually, after her marriage fell apart, she drowned herself in the very same river. But now, things had reversed. I sat there on the muddy bank, my chest heaving, the crowd of villagers closing in, their voices a swarm of gossip. Ivy was already in Marcus's arms, trembling like a frightened bird, while he draped his coat around her shoulders. He didn't even glance at me. Not once. A bitter laugh rose in my throat, though it came out as a cough. The icy water clung to my skin, and yet, I felt a fire burning in my chest. I knew this moment. I knew what would come if I followed the same path. In my last life, Marcus and I had gone through with the engagement after this accident. Ivy had been married off to a brute of a man, Rex Doyle, and her life had ended in misery. But Marcus, oh Marcus, he had changed. After Ivy's death, he grew colder, sharper, consumed by something I didn't understand. He built a business from nothing during the economic reforms, turned into a wealthy, ruthless man. And then he destroyed me. Framed my father for embezzlement. Sent my family into ruin. Took everything. When I confronted him, he sneered at me, his eyes full of mockery. If you hadn't clung so desperately to our engagement, he had spat, would Ivy have died so early? She died miserably. What makes you think you deserve to live well? That was the man I had tied my fate to. And here I was again. Back at the beginning. My hands trembled as I pressed them into the mud, steadying myself. Ben Wilder hovered nearby, his simple eyes searching mine as if waiting for me to say something. He had saved me. Me. Not Marcus. Not Ivy. Me. The villagers were already whispering. Did you see that? Reed didn't even look at Nora. Picked Ivy first like she was his wife already. And Nora, pulled out by Ben the fool? What a joke of fate. The words stung, but they also cleared the fog in my mind. I knew what I had to do. I rose to my feet, my dress heavy with river water, my hair plastered to my cheeks. My best friend Jenna Park rushed to my side, her face pale with shock. Nora, are you all right? I nodded slowly, though inside I was anything but. My body was shivering, but my resolve was already forming. I turned to face the crowd. My voice came out hoarse, but it carried. I owe my life to Ben Wilder. And for that I will repay him the only way I know how. I drew a breath, my chest tight, but I forced the words out. I will marry him. Gasps. Laughter. The villagers erupted like a firecracker, voices overlapping. She's lost her mind. Nora Bennett, the educated city girl, marrying a fool? She must have hit her head when she fell in. Even Jenna staggered back, her mouth hanging open. Nora, what are you saying? Of all people, a fool? But I stood tall, mud-streaked and drenched, yet more certain than I had ever been in my first life. In the last timeline, marrying Marcus Reed had led to ruin. This time I would cut him from my life before he could ever touch mine again. Even if the whole village laughed, even if Jenna called me insane, I would choose differently. Better to marry a fool who saved me than a clever man who destroyed me. And in the stunned silence that followed, I caught Marcus's eyes at last. For a flicker of a second there was something in his gaze. Shock, perhaps even fury. But then he turned back to Ivy, tightening his coat around her trembling frame, his expression soft, protective. It didn't matter anymore. I had made my choice. And as I looked at Ben Wilder, still standing awkwardly by my side with riverweed tangled in his hair, I whispered silently to myself, this is the beginning of a new life. The news spread through the village faster than wildfire. By the time the sun dipped below the hills and the cicadas began their nightly chorus, everyone knew Nora Bennett had vowed to marry Ben Wilder, the village fool. I could feel their stares even when I closed the shutters of my little room. They pressed through the wood and paper like pinpricks along my skin. My ears rang with whispers, half pity, half mockery. The educated girl from the city, the daughter of a once respected official, was now throwing herself at a man who could barely string a sentence together. Jenna Park stormed into my house that evening, cheeks flushed and voice sharp. Nora, you've lost your mind. Tell me you were only joking when you said that in front of everyone. I sat at the table, wringing out my wet dress and hanging it over the chair to dry. My hair was still damp, clinging to my neck, but my resolve had only grown firmer. I wasn't joking, I said. She slammed her palms on the table so hard the bowls rattled. Then you are insane. Of all the men you could marry, Logan Carter, whose father is a county official, or Evan Brooks, who's about to be recommended for university, you choose Ben Wilder? The fool. I lifted my eyes to hers, calm against her storm. Better a fool who saved me than a fiancé who abandoned me without a thought. Her breath caught, and for a moment she had no words. She had been there on the riverbank. She had screamed Marcus's name until her voice broke, begged him to rescue me. But Marcus had chosen Ivy. We both knew it. Jenna's voice softened, but it trembled with hurt. You don't have to marry Marcus, fine. But why throw yourself into ruin? There are better men, good men, who would cherish you. Why chain yourself to a simpleton? I rose, pacing slowly to the window. The village outside was alive with shadows. Neighbors lingering, gossips spilling between doorways. Because in my last life, I whispered, I chose Marcus. And it destroyed everything. She frowned, not understanding, of course. I couldn't tell her the truth, that I had lived this once before, that I knew exactly how the threads of fate would twist if I followed the same path. She wouldn't believe me. So instead I turned back to her with a bitter smile. I'd rather tie myself to someone harmless than to someone clever enough to ruin me. Before she could argue further, voices rose from outside. A knock, then the curtain at the doorway lifted. And there they were. Marcus Reed and Ivy Shaw. The air inside my small room turned icy in an instant. Jenna's face contorted with fury and she surged to her feet. What are you doing here? Haven't you humiliated Nora enough for one day? I caught her sleeve before she could charge at them. My lips curled into the faintest smile. There's nothing shameful in my decision, Jenna. If they dare to come, then I dare to face them. Marcus stepped in first, tall and composed, his coat freshly dried from earlier. Ivy trailed after, wrapped in his scarf, her eyes still shimmering with staged fragility. Nora, Ivy breathed, rushing to me as though she were the victim. She caught my hand with trembling fingers. Everyone says you're going to marry Ben. It's my fault, isn't it? If I had been more careful, Marcus wouldn't have had to save me and none of this would have happened. Her words dripped with guilt, but her eyes flickered with triumph. Across lifetimes that expression hadn't changed. Marcus rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his gaze tender as he looked at her. Ivy, don't blame yourself. You're too kind. His voice then hardened as he turned to me. As for who marries whom, that has nothing to do with me. Nor you've made your choice. Live with it. My heart twisted at the echo of his tone. In my last life he had spoken with the same icy detachment even as he destroyed everything I loved. I lifted my chin. Exactly. This is my matter. You needn't concern yourself. Ivy's eyes welled up instantly, tears falling like pearls from a broken string. Nora, are you angry with me? I know you and Marcus didn't have an official engagement, but the whole village saw him save me. When it comes to love, does it really matter who came first? The one who isn't loved is the third wheel. The room spun with the audacity of her words. Jenna let out a furious scoff, muttering curses under her breath. But Ivy wasn't finished. She pressed her trembling hands together and continued, "Why don't we compete fairly? Let's both stay unmarried for now. We can give Marcus time to figure out how he truly feels and then—" A laugh broke from my lips, sharp and cold. I couldn't hold it back. Compete? This wasn't the era of concubines and harems. We lived under monogamy. Yet she had the gall to suggest two women circling one man like vultures? You came here not to apologize but to humiliate me, I said, my voice steady. Marcus's gaze sharpened into a blade. Cindy, why even bother with her? He caught himself, corrected, Ivy. I've only ever loved you. Just looking at another woman feels filthy. His contemptuous glance slid over me like acid, burning through flesh and bone. A flicker of smugness passed over Ivy's tear-stained face before she masked it with a pitiful shake of her head. Don't say that, Marcus. Nora's already suffered enough. The performance between them was almost comical if not so cruel. I lowered my gaze to the wedding dress I was stitching. My fingers brushed over the embroidered mandarin ducks, symbols of loyalty and harmony. I let my touch linger as I spoke. You're right, Marcus. Marriage should be loyal and unwavering. That's why I'll marry Ben. And once I do, I'll never look at another man. Silence fell for a breath. Then Ivy's mask cracked. A flash of anger, quick and sharp, crossed her eyes. You'd really marry a fool? She demanded. What's wrong with a fool? I asked softly. At least a fool doesn't scheme. At least he doesn't destroy families. Marcus's jaw tightened, his handsome face contorting into something darker. He seized Ivy's wrist, his movements harsh. Let's go, he snapped, dragging her toward the door. Ivy stumbled after him, but not before twisting back to cast me a victorious smile. When they were gone, Jenna exploded, stomping the ground. Those two bastards came here just to rub it in your face. She grabbed a broom and swept the spot where Marcus had stood, as if to cleanse the room of his stench. I let her rage, my own heart strangely calm. The outcome would have been the same no matter what. Whoever I married, I wanted it to be someone who wouldn't calculate my every move. Someone who wouldn't hold grudges deep enough to poison generations. The next day, as the commune announced plans for the group wedding, I decided I would not cower. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me humiliated. I dug out the small savings I had hidden, coins carefully wrapped in cloth, and bought bolts of bright red fabric from the county supply store. Night after night, by the dim light of an oil lamp, I stitched my wedding dress. Every careful stitch sewed bitterness from 2 lifetimes into its seams. As the needle pierced fabric, I whispered to myself, steady as a mantra, this time will be different. This time I won't let them destroy me. But even as I whispered, the village outside hummed with venom. She's marrying Ben Wilder? She must have water in her brain. Maybe he saw her body in the river and now she has no choice. Imagine, the educated girl and the fool. What a pair. Their laughter crawled through the walls, but I kept sewing. My wedding dress would not just be red. It would be a shield. On the eve of the ceremony, as I tied the final knot in the thread, I looked into the cracked mirror on my desk. My reflection was pale, eyes hollowed by exhaustion, but my smile was sharp. I would walk into that group wedding not as their joke, not as their pity, but as a woman who chose her fate with open eyes. And let them talk. Let them choke on their laughter when the truth began to unravel. As this time I was ready. The day began with the sharp clang of a bicycle bell echoing from the village entrance. At first I thought it was nothing unusual, just another neighbor cycling back from the county supply store. But the sound didn't fade. It grew louder, insistent, drawing voices from every doorway like moths to flame. By the time I stepped outside, drying my freshly washed hair with a towel, a crowd had already gathered. Children darted through the dust, women shaded their eyes, and men stood with arms crossed, watching curiously as the scene unfolded. And what a scene it was. Mrs. Waller, the most famous matchmaker in the county, was pushing her bicycle through the crowd, her voice booming like a brass gong. Make way for the bride's betrothal gifts." Behind her marched 4 young men, each in crisp blue work uniforms, their faces shining with pride. Balanced on their shoulders were Camp Horwood boxes painted with bold red double happiness characters. Scarlet ribbons fluttered in the breeze, catching the morning sunlight. The village gasped as one boy in front set his load down carefully and pulled away a layer of red silk. Beneath it gleamed the polished body of a brand-new Shanghai sewing machine. 3 functions, complete set. Mrs. Waller crowed, puffing out her chest. Straight stitch, zigzag, and buttonhole. The crowd erupted in chatter. A sewing machine? That's rarer than gold. My niece has been on the wait list for 2 years and still hasn't gotten one. They say only county officials can get them. But Mrs. Waller wasn't finished. She pointed proudly at the other boxes, her voice dripping with satisfaction. A Forever brand bicycle, a Shanghai wristwatch, and a Pay brand radio. All hot items from the county supply store, straight from the city. The air buzzed with disbelief. I stood frozen on my doorstep, towel still in my hands. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear the gossip around me. These weren't just betrothal gifts. These were luxuries, symbols of status and wealth. And they were being carried to my door. The whispers rose like a storm. Didn't they say she was marrying a fool? Where would Ben Wilder ever get this kind of money? It must be her family's savings. Poor girl, emptying her dowry just to keep face. No, look at Mrs. Waller. She wouldn't lie about this. Someone's backing him. Jealousy flickered in the eyes of the village bachelors. One muttered bitterly, "If I'd known, I would have jumped into the river myself. Might have snagged the city girl and all this treasure too." I felt my palms grow clammy. I hadn't bought these things. My father hadn't either. So where had they come from? Before I could step forward, a sharp, honeyed voice cut through the noise. Well, well. The crowd parted and there stood Ivy Shaw, clinging tightly to Marcus Reed's arm. They had dressed with meticulous care. Marcus wore his pressed white shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to show the strength of his forearms, while Ivy floated beside him in pale blue, her hair braided with ribbons that made her look as delicate as porcelain. The villagers' attention shifted instantly, eyes darting between me and them like they were watching a play. Ivy pushed her way to the front, her lips curved in a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. She stopped before the gleaming wedding gifts and let out a soft sigh. "Nora," she said, her voice carrying with practiced innocence. "As children we were taught to understand our parents' struggles. Even if you're marrying Ben, there's no need to put on such a grand show. Completely draining your family's savings just to keep up appearances. All this will have to be paid back eventually." Her words slid like poison into the ears of the villagers. The whispers turned sharp. So it is her family's money. Shameless, throwing it all away on a fool. She's proud and haughty but stupid at the core. Ivy folded her hands demurely, her lashes lowered just enough to appear virtuous, while Marcus smirked at her side, his arms crossed. His eyes traveled over me with disdain, lingering on my plain dress, on the towel in my hand, as if I were some bedraggled stray pretending to be a bride. "Listen up, Nora," Marcus sneered, his voice pitched for everyone to hear. "Ivy is the only woman I will ever marry. As for you," he let his gaze sweep me from head to toe, slow and cruel, before snorting. "Even if you clung to me your entire life, I would never give you a title. At best, if you stay single your whole life, maybe, you'd be allowed into the Reed family shrine after you're dead." The crowd laughed, some openly, some behind their hands. My face burned, but I stood firm, refusing to let my knees buckle. Ivy tugged Marcus's sleeve, feigning dismay. "Don't say that, Marcus. Nora is already pitiful enough. Rescued by a fool, giving up all her savings. We should be kind." Marcus chuckled darkly. "Kind? You think marrying a fool will bring her a good life? Look at him. Slow as a tortoise. He probably doesn't even know what happens on a wedding night. She's basically marrying into widowhood." My nails dug into my palms, but I forced my voice to remain steady. Who I marry or whether I marry at all is none of your concern. Ben saved my life. Even if he's a fool, I'm willing to be with him. Willing and proud. The words rang louder than I expected, and for a fleeting moment, silence fell. Marcus's smug smile faltered, replaced with a flicker of something darker, something possessive. Ivy gasped, eyes wide in mock pity. Nora, life won't be easy married to a fool. If you run into trouble later, don't feel embarrassed to come to us. We're educated youths. We'll help however we can. The villagers nodded, murmuring their approval. Such a kind girl, Ivy. No wonder she found someone like Accountant Reed. It's karma. I let out a cold laugh that sliced through their chorus. What's wrong with a fool? At least he's kind-hearted. He doesn't plot, doesn't manipulate, doesn't destroy families and lives. The murmurs died. My eyes swept over the crowd, daring them to speak. No one did. I turned to Mrs. Waller, who was beaming as though she'd orchestrated the grandest spectacle of her career. Auntie, please move the betrothal gifts inside. She gave me a conspiratorial wink, signaling the young men to carry the treasures into our courtyard. As they passed, I pulled her aside, lowering my voice. What's going on here? Where did Ben get the money for all this? Her grin spread ear to ear, every tooth showing. You'll understand soon enough. Just wait. I stood there, confused but outwardly composed as the villagers continued to gawk. Marcus and Ivy lingered, their performance unraveling as jealousy flickered behind their polished expressions. For once I didn't feel like the fool. For once I felt the ground beneath me shift in my favor. That night, as I sat by the oil lamp sewing the final seam of my wedding dress, I could still hear the echoes of the day. The villagers' envy, Ivy's brittle smile, Marcus's disdain. But beneath it all pulsed a new kind of tension, anticipation. Something was changing. And though I didn't yet know the truth behind Ben Wilder's sudden wealth, my heart whispered that fate was moving in ways Marcus and Ivy could never predict. This time it was my turn to watch them squirm. The night before the wedding was heavy with silence. The oil lamp on my desk flickered weakly, its flames struggling against the draft sneaking through the papered window. Outside, the village had quieted. Even the dogs had curled up in their corners, leaving only the occasional rustle of the wind in the bamboo groves. I sat bent over my wedding dress, needle in hand, threading the last of the crimson silk through the embroidered mandarin ducks. Each stitch seemed to echo with the bitterness of 2 lifetimes, but also with the stubborn determination of this one. This is it, I told myself. Tomorrow I will walk forward and there will be no turning back. But fate, it seemed, wasn't finished testing me. A soft creak at the window jolted me upright. The thin paper shivered and then a familiar silhouette pressed against it. Broad shoulders. A familiar angle of the jaw. My heart stuttered, then hardened. Marcus Reed. His voice came low, husky with tension. Nora. I froze, needle paused midair. For a long moment I didn't answer. Then slowly I set the dress aside, folding the fabric with deliberate care before I lifted my chin. What do you want? There was silence, then a faint exhale. Are you really going to marry that fool? A cold laugh slipped from my lips. Why? Does that surprise you? Isn't this exactly what you wanted? His shadow shifted uneasily on the window paper. For once his confidence faltered. He leaned closer and his voice softened. I'm not who you think I am, Nora. You don't understand. If I hadn't saved Ivy that day, her life would have been ruined. I had no choice. The needle slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the wooden table. My chest tightened, memories from my past life crashing over me. Ivy's watery eyes, her feigned fragility, her pitiful whispers. Maybe Nora didn't mean to drag me into the river. Marcus had believed her every word. And now here he was again, spinning excuses, trying to weave a story where he was the noble savior. I clenched my fist. No choice? You had a choice, Marcus. You just didn't choose me. There was a pause. Then his voice dropped, almost pleading. It's different now. Marrying that fool will ruin your life. Just wait. Once I've settled things with Ivy, I won't turn my back on you. My body went rigid. A bitter taste coated my tongue. Not long ago he had stood before the entire village and declared that I was filth. That even looking at another woman made him feel dirty. And now he dared whisper at my window like a lover promising the world? My hands trembled as I clenched the folds of my dress. Memories swarmed. My father's shoulders slumped as he was dragged away in chains. My mother's eyes red and swollen from endless crying. The unborn child who never saw the light of day. All of it ruined by Marcus Reed. I rose, my chair scraping harshly against the floor. With one sharp motion I flung the window open. There he was. Marcus stood beneath the pale moonlight, his face drawn and desperate. The carefully groomed accountant, the village's admired youth, now looked like a man grasping at shadows. His eyes searched mine with an intensity that might once have made my heart flutter. Now it only filled me with disgust. "You don't have to trouble yourself," I said, my voice cold. "Whether I live well or not has nothing to do with you." He flinched as though my words had struck him. "Nora," he said, stepping closer, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "We shared something in our youth. I always kept a place for you in my heart. Don't act out of spite. Life with me would be better than with him." A sneer tugged at my lips. "You're right. Even if I marry a fool, it's still better than being involved with you in any way." His expression twisted, his face contorting with fury. "Nora Bennett, don't be ungrateful. I'm giving you a chance. Do you know how many women would beg to be in your position? Fine. Marry the fool if you want. But don't come crawling to me when you regret it." His voice rose, rough and venomous, before his footsteps stomped away into the darkness. The night air settled once more. I closed the window slowly, the wood cool against my fingers. My body shook, but not from fear. From release. Inside me something had snapped free. I bent down, picked up the fallen thread and needle and sat again at the desk. My hands moved quickly, almost feverishly, tying off the last stitch of my wedding dress. The crimson silk gleamed in the lamplight, vibrant and alive. When the final knot tightened, I lifted the scissors and snipped the thread. The sound was small, almost insignificant, a faint snick against the quiet night. But to me it was thunder. The cursed entanglement of 2 lifetimes, the binding knot that had tied me to Marcus Reed, was cut. Severed. Done. I stared at the piece of thread lying curled on the floor. For the first time I didn't feel the urge to pick it up and tie it back together. Could stay broken. It should stay broken. Dawn crept in through the window, painting the horizon with faint streaks of gold. I gazed at my reflection in the cracked mirror on my desk. My face was pale, weary from a sleepless night, but my eyes burned with something fierce. The red of the wedding dress blazed against the soft morning light, bold and defiant. Tomorrow I would wear it. Tomorrow I would walk forward, not as Marcus Reed's cast-off, not as Ivy Shaw's rival, but as my own woman. For the first time in 2 lives I felt free. The morning of the group wedding arrived, and with it came a nervous energy that hung over the entire commune like a storm waiting to break. The square outside the production team office was already bustling when I stepped out of my house. Red paper cutouts fluttered from the eaves, drums thudded in rhythm, and villagers poured in from every lane to witness what promised to be the most talked-about ceremony in years. The air smelled of incense, fresh straw, and a hint of anticipation, though whether it was for the wedding itself or for the spectacle of me walking down the aisle beside a fool, I couldn't tell. I tightened the sash of my red wedding dress and adjusted the veil folded over my arm. Every stitch of this dress carried the weight of my decision, and I wore it like armor. Jenna Park fussed around me, straightening the mandarin duck embroidery on my sleeve. "Nora, are you really going through with this? Even now?" I smiled faintly. "I made a vow. I'll see it through." She shook her head, muttering, "Stubborn to the bone. If this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." Yet her hands were gentle as they adjusted the hem, her eyes shining with unshed worry. Before I could reply, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Loud voices. Gasps. "What's this? Is that? Quick, come see." Jenna darted to the doorway, her eyes widening. She spun back toward me, breathless. "Nora, you won't believe this. Come quickly." My stomach knotted. I stepped outside, following her gaze. At the commune bulletin board, a large sheet of freshly inked paper had been posted. Villagers swarmed around it, their chatter a deafening hum. I edged closer until I could see the bold black characters scrawled across the top. "Battle hero recognized, Captain Lucas Ward." Beneath the headline was an old, yellowing photograph. A young officer in a crisp military uniform stood proudly on a podium, medals gleaming against his chest. His posture was straight, his gaze steady, his entire being radiating honor. I blinked, my heart slamming against my ribs. Because even through the grainy lines of the photograph I recognized him. Ben Wilder. Or rather, Lucas Ward. My mind reeled, memories colliding. The simple man who had dragged me from the river, the fool who stammered when he spoke, who was mocked by children and pitted by adults. He was the same man in that photo. Impossible, I whispered, my hands trembling. But it wasn't. The resemblance was undeniable. A flood of words tumbled from the paper. Flood of 75. Struck on the head by a collapsed beam while rescuing 3 children. Memory loss. Relocated to the village under care. Jenna gripped my arm, her voice shaking with awe. Nora, don't you see? The shock of saving you in the river. It must have jolted his memory back. My throat went dry. I remembered the moment he'd hauled me onto the muddy bank, his grip strong and steady despite the river's pull. I dismissed it as luck, as brute strength. But no, there had been something in his eyes, a flicker of awareness returning even then. Suddenly, shouts erupted outside the bulletin crowd. People were pointing toward the lane leading into the square. There he is. It's really him. The fool, no, the hero. I turned. And there he stood. Ben Wilder no longer. Lucas Ward, dressed in a faded but immaculately pressed military uniform, medals pinned across his chest. The morning sun glinted off the polished metal, dazzling the crowd. His back was straight, his stride steady, his presence commanding in a way no villager could mistake. He was no longer the simpleton mocked by children. He was a soldier. A hero. My breath caught. My heart, traitorous thing, swelled with something dangerously close to pride. As Lucas walked into the square, the villagers pressed back, their jeers silenced, replaced with awed murmurs. Oh my lord. He's really Captain Ward. All this time we called him a fool. Nora Bennett hit the jackpot. Dumped by Marcus and ended up with a national hero instead. Ivy Shaw pushed through the crowd, her face pale, her lips trembling. Her eyes locked on the medals gleaming across his chest, and I saw jealousy flash like lightning in her gaze. She clutched Marcus's arms so tightly her knuckles whitened. Marcus himself froze, his expression caught between disbelief and fury. He had mocked me for marrying a fool. Now the fool had become a hero greater than him in every possible way. Lucas's eyes searched the crowd until they found mine. The warmth there nearly buckled my knees. Nora, he said, his voice no longer halting or uncertain. It was clear, steady, deep. When I pulled you from the river, something inside me woke up. It was like waking from a long, long dream. Gasps rippled around us. Jenna clasped her hands to her chest, her eyes misting. Lucas stepped closer, stopping just before me. He extended his hand, palm broad and warm, steady as the earth beneath us. Walk with me, he said softly. Without hesitation I placed my hand in his. A hush fell over the square. Villagers leaned in, their mouths open. The smirks that had been waiting to see me humiliated froze solid, replaced with shock and awe. Good heavens, she's marrying a war hero. And Marcus Reed? Just an accountant. Didn't he say marrying a fool was widowhood? Now who's the real fool? Ivy's face drained of color, her lips trembling. Marcus's jaw clenched, his eyes bloodshot with barely contained rage. Lucas turned to them briefly, his expression calm but edged with steel. I wish you both well, he said. Nothing more. Nothing less. Then he looked back at me, and in his gaze there was only tenderness. We walked side by side toward the platform where the wedding couples would be blessed. My hand remained in his, my heart racing with every step. The drums rolled, the officiant raised his voice, and the ceremony began. But I barely heard the words. All I felt was the warmth of Lucas's hand, the strength of his presence beside me, the certainty that this time, this life, I had chosen differently. And perhaps for once I had chosen right. The square was a sea of red and gold. Banners stretched across the bamboo poles, drums boomed in steady rhythm, and the scent of incense curled upward into the crisp autumn air. Rows of brides stood in line, veils draped over their heads, while grooms straightened their jackets nervously. The commune leaders bustled around with clipboards and loud voices, herding people into place like cattle. And then there was me. My red wedding dress clung to my shoulders, the embroidery of mandarin ducks shimmering under the sunlight. At my side stood Lucas Ward, No longer Ben Wilder, no longer a fool, but a soldier in his faded uniform, medals gleaming across his chest. His presence filled the space beside me so fully that it was hard to remember he'd ever been dismissed as simple. I felt the villagers' stares burning into us. Some were awestruck, others resentful, but all of them watched as if they were witnessing a living legend. Jenna Park, standing a few steps behind me as my attendant, leaned forward and whispered, "They're choking on their laughter now. Every one of them thought you'd be humiliated." I let out a slow breath. Let them choke. Still, beneath my composure, my stomach twisted. This was it, the moment when I would finally sever my past life from this one. No matter what storms came, I was determined to walk forward with Lucas. The officiant, an elderly cadre with a voice like gravel, raised his hands. "We will now begin the ceremony for the commune's group wedding. Each couple will step forward to the platform and bow to heaven, to earth, and to each other." The crowd cheered. But before the first drumbeat sounded, a sharp, desperate voice ripped through the air. "Stop!" Gasps. The drums faltered into silence. I turned, my heart sinking even though I already knew. Marcus Reed. He shoved through the crowd, his face pale and eyes wild. Ivy Shaw clung desperately to his arm, her expression a mixture of panic and rage, but Marcus shook her off like she was nothing more than a bothersome vine. His gaze locked on me, burning with something between fury and desperation. He strode straight into the square, blocking the platform. The villagers erupted in whispers. "What is he doing? Isn't he marrying Ivy today? Does he dare ruin a military wedding?" The officiant's face darkened. "Marcus Reed, step aside. You have no right to interrupt." But Marcus ignored him. His eyes were fixed on me, trembling with intensity. "Nora, are you really going to marry him? This fool." I stiffened. Once those words might have cut me to the core. Once I might have flinched, looked away, doubted myself. But not now. Not when Lucas stood beside me, steady as a mountain. "What's the matter, Marcus?" I asked, my voice ringing clear. "Do you regret saving Ivy? Or do you regret abandoning me?" His lips trembled. I don't regret saving Ivy. But you." He took a step closer, his hand half reaching for me. "Nora, don't do this. Don't marry him. Come back to me. I'll give up everything else if you'll just." A firm shadow moved between us. "Lucas." He stepped forward, his figure tall and unyielding, blocking Marcus's desperate reach. His voice carried the calm steel of a soldier used to command. "Please step aside. Don't delay our ceremony." Marcus's jaw tightened. He turned, eyes darting to the medals on Lucas's chest, and his face twisted. "Lucas Ward," he spat, "don't think wearing a uniform makes you better than me. You don't know what's between Nora and me. He can't marry you. Not when she..." Lucas's gaze sharpened and he asked evenly, "Nora, do you want to go with him?" The entire square fell into breathless silence. Every eye turned to me. Marcus's expression was pleading, his eyes red with desperation. Ivy stood behind him, face pale with horror. The villagers leaned forward, hungry for scandal. I met Lucas's calm eyes, my heart steady for the first time in 2 lifetimes. "No," I said firmly, my voice carrying across the square. "I don't want to." The crowd gasped. Marcus staggered back as though struck, disbelief etched across his face. You can't mean that." But I did. I turned, slipping my hand into Lucas's. His palm was warm, his grip strong, grounding me more than anything else in the world. Lucas let out a quiet smile, his voice firm. "You heard her. She doesn't want to go with you. Now leave." Marcus's face contorted. He lunged forward like a madman, but instantly 6 strong young men from the commune, militia members, leapt in, restraining him by the arms. He fought, cursing, his voice breaking. "Nora, have you forgotten everything we've been through? How can you marry someone else?" I didn't look back. I only tightened my arms around Lucas's. At this point, what so-called history did Marcus and I even have left? In my last life, he hadn't cared about history or emotion when he ruined my entire family. And now, suddenly, he wanted to play the role of the man who loved too deeply? No. He didn't want me back because he loved me. He just couldn't stand the thought that something he once discarded had become someone else's treasure. The officiant cleared his throat, glaring at the spectacle. "Remove him. A soldier's wedding is not to be disgraced by drunken madness." The militia dragged Marcus back, his voice breaking into hoarse shouts. Ivy scrambled after him, tears streaking her face as she hissed, "Marcus, stop embarrassing us. Everyone's watching." But Marcus didn't hear. His cries echoed through the square until they faded into the distance. A hush fell once more. Then the officiant raised his hands again. "The ceremony will continue." Drums boomed. The ritual resumed. I bowed to heaven. I bowed to earth. And finally I bowed to Lucas. When I straightened, his eyes were on mine, filled with something tender and unwavering. The crowd, once hungry for scandal, now erupted in cheers. Lily Adams, no, Nora Bennett, married a hero. Better than that accountant Reed could ever be. Serves Ivy right, thinking she won. I glanced briefly at the edge of the square. Ivy's face was ashen, her nails digging into her palms until they bled. Rage and humiliation twisted her features, but I only felt a cold, detached satisfaction. Let her stew in her jealousy. Let Marcus drown in his regret. I had walked forward and I wasn't turning back. After the ceremony, as Lucas and I left the platform hand in hand, Jenna rushed to my side, her eyes sparkling with joy. "You did it, Nora. You really did it." I smiled, the weight of 2 lifetimes lifting from my chest. "No. We did it. This time I chose right." Lucas looked down at me, his lips curving into the faintest smile. "And I chose you." The villagers followed us with their eyes as we walked away, whispers trailing in our wake. But for the first time I didn't feel like prey in their gossip. I felt untouchable. And beside me, Lucas's steady presence promised that no matter what storms came next, I wouldn't face them alone. The autumn air was sharp with the scent of harvested grain. Everywhere I turned, the village was alive with chatter about the wedding. Some praised, some whispered envy, some spat bitter words behind closed doors. But no matter what they said, the truth remained. I had married Captain Lucas Ward, war hero, the man once dismissed as a fool. And Marcus Reed? He had been dragged away from the wedding square like a madman. The villagers still cackled about it over their rice bowls. For a few days, peace settled over me like a fragile silk veil. I busied myself with household chores, stitched a pair of shoes for Lucas, even laughed when Jenna teased me about how much my face glowed now. But peace in this village never lasted long. Not with Ivy Shaw still seething. Ivy had always been delicate in appearance, her eyes brimming with practiced tears. But now, after the ceremony, her mask was cracking. I saw her in passing once outside the commune office. She clung to Marcus's arm, her face pale, her lips trembling as she muttered, "Why won't you look at me? Why is it always Nora?" Marcus shook her off with a grunt, his eyes bloodshot from drink. "Shut up, Ivy. You wouldn't understand." The way she flinched, her pride bruised, her jealousy ignited, sent a shiver down my spine. I knew that look. I'd seen it before in my last life, just before she dragged me into ruin. This time though I was watching. It happened on the evening of a film showing at the grain yard. The commune had rigged up a projector and the entire village was buzzing with excitement. People carried benches and mats, children skipped ahead, couples whispered under the dusk sky. I stayed home with Lucas, helping him sharpen a sickle for the next day's work. But as the loudspeakers crackled with the movie's opening song, I slipped outside to fetch water. That's when I heard it, voices low, sharp just beyond the haystack. I crept closer, pressing myself into the shadows. Rex Doyle. Even in the dim light, his greasy grin and cigarette glow gave him away. He leaned against the wall, his eyes narrow with malice. Opposite him stood Ivy Shaw, her blouse neat but her posture tense, her voice barely above a hiss. "Tomorrow night," she whispered, "the whole village will be at the movie. That's your chance. Drag her into the shed behind the hill. Once it's done, I'll give you 20 yuan. Rex let out a disgusting chuckle, spitting on the ground. "So you really hate her that much, huh?" Ivy's tone was cold as ice. "If it weren't for her, Marcus wouldn't be like this. If I can't have him, then she won't either." My hands curled into fists. My nails dug so deep into my palms I felt them pierce skin. So this was her plan. If she couldn't ruin me with whispers, she would ruin me with shame. But not this time. That night I told Lucas everything. He listened without interruption, his face calm but his jaw tight, his eyes dark as storm clouds. When I finished, he set down the sickle and reached for my hand. "We'll let her think she's clever. The militia squad will be waiting behind the hill. If Rex Doyle lays a finger on you, he'll regret it for the rest of his life. Are you sure? I asked. My voice was steady, but inside my heart trembled. Lucas nodded firmly. I've fought men with rifles and grenades. Do you think a thug like him frightens me? A smile tugged at my lips despite the tension. Still, I'll need to play the bait. He frowned instantly, but I lifted my chin. If I don't see Ivy's downfall with my own eyes, I'll never sleep well at night. Finally he exhaled, squeezing my hand gently. Then I'll be 2 steps behind you. Always. The next night the grain yard was alive with laughter. The film projector rattled, casting flickering light against the sheets strung across bamboo poles. Children shrieked with delight, women whispered behind their hands, men puffed their pipes and joked loudly. I joined for a while, sitting among the women with a calm smile. Then halfway through the film I rose quietly. I need the restroom, I murmured. No one paid much attention. Perfect. I slipped away from the crowd, my footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path. The night air was cool, the sky stretched wide with stars. I turned the corner near the grain barn. And then they came. Rex Doyle and another thug leapt out of the shadows, their hands grabbing my arms roughly. The stench of alcohol rolled off them in waves. Hey city girl, Rex slurred, his grin vile. Let's take you somewhere fun. I feigned panic, thrashing weakly. Let me go. What are you doing? He laughed, his greasy hand reaching toward my face. Don't be scared, sweetheart. You'll enjoy it soon enough. Before his fingers could touch me, a beam of light cut through the darkness. Get them. Lucas's voice rang out like a rifle shot. Flashlights burst across the yard, rifles glinting cold. Militiamen surged forward, their boots thudding like drums. Rex's grin vanished in an instant. His legs buckled and with a pitiful whimper he collapsed to his knees. The other thug tried to run, but a soldier swept his legs out from under him, pinning him to the ground. I stepped back, my heart pounding but relief flooding me. Lucas was already at my side, his hand steady on my shoulder. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice low, almost trembling. No, I whispered. Not at all. He pulled me close, his arm protective, his glare scorching Rex Doyle until the thug cowered like a rat. News of the arrest spread through the village before dawn. By the time the rooster crowed, everyone knew. Rex Doyle and his accomplice had been caught trying to assault Nora Bennett during the movie. But that wasn't all. By morning Rex's family stormed Ivy's house in a frenzy, their voices carrying across the fields. I stood at my courtyard gate, listening as they screamed curses and accusations. You witch. Rex's mother wailed, throwing herself onto the ground, pounding her thighs. You dragged my son down. If he goes to jail, I'll never forgive you. One of his sisters hurled a bucket of pig slop straight at Ivy, splattering her hair and blouse. Ivy shrieked, clawing at the filth dripping down her face. Can't keep your own man, the sister spat, yanking Ivy's hair viciously. So you scheme with mine? Vixen. The villagers gathered in droves, watching with a mix of glee and scorn. Some muttered that it was divine retribution. Others simply laughed, cracking sunflower seeds as though it were entertainment. And standing at the edge of the crowd was Marcus. He didn't move to defend Ivy. Didn't so much as glance at her humiliation. Instead he walked past carrying a bag of sugar and canned fruit, luxuries from the co-op. He came straight toward my house, his face stiff, his eyes fixed on me. Ivy saw him, desperation flaring. Marcus. Help me, she screamed, clawing at the hands holding her down. He didn't even pause. He just kept walking, leaving her to drown in her disgrace. My stomach twisted, not out of pity but out of cold clarity. Ivy had played her hand and she had lost. Marcus stopped at my gate, raising the bag as if in offering. Nora, he said softly, I heard what happened last night. I brought you something. Before I could speak, Lucas stepped out from the house. His shadow fell across the ground, solid and unyielding. Get lost, he said flatly. Marcus flinched, taking a step back. But his eyes lingered on me, desperate, imploring. I just wanted to check if she was hurt. In the distance, Ivy screamed again, her voice cracking as Rex's family dragged her to the commune office for questioning. Marcus's gaze wavered, torn between her humiliation and me. And for the first time I realized he wasn't capable of love. Not real love. Not for Ivy, not for me, not for anyone but himself. And I felt nothing for him. Not anger. Not sadness. Only indifference. Lucas's hand brushed mine, grounding me. I squeezed it back. Go home, Marcus, I said, my tone colder than the autumn wind. You have nothing left to say to me. His eyes flickered with pain, then fury, before he finally turned and walked away. That night, as Lucas and I sat under the locust tree, the world felt strangely quiet. Do you regret letting me play the bait? I asked softly. He shook his head. No. Because now she's exposed. And because you never stood alone. I leaned my head against his shoulder, the faint scent of soap and iron filling my senses. For the first time in 2 lifetimes I felt safe. Truly safe. And as Ivy's cries echoed faintly from the commune office, I knew. The trap she had set for me had become her own undoing. The storm finally broke. 4 days after the grainyard incident, the village buzzed like a hive shaken from its branch. Word of Ivy Shaw's scheming spread from the rice paddies to the commune kitchen. Everyone knew she had conspired with Rex Doyle, and everyone knew she had failed. The story grew wilder with each telling. Some said she promised Rex money, others swore she'd offered herself. Whatever the details, the truth was clear. Ivy's mask of innocence had shattered. When the commune cadres finally delivered their verdict, the whole village gathered to hear it. Ivy Shaw, the officer declared, his voice ringing across the square, is sentenced to labor reform for inciting criminal activity. She will be transferred to the provincial camp tomorrow. Gasps. Murmurs. A few sharp laughs. Ivy collapsed where she stood, her face ashen. No, I can't go there. Please, Marcus. She clawed at his sleeve, her nails dragging across the fabric like a drowning woman grasping at driftwood. But Marcus didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on the ground, his jaw clenched, his face gray with humiliation. The villagers muttered, shaking their heads. Dog eats dog. Didn't she act so pure? Look at her now. She ruined herself. And Marcus too. I stood at the edge of the crowd, Lucas beside me, his uniform crisp despite the autumn dust. His hand brushed against mine, steadying me. For once, I didn't feel anger watching Ivy crumple in the dirt. I felt nothing at all. When she was dragged away the next day, screaming Marcus's name until her voice broke, the village didn't mourn. They watched, spat, and turned back to their work. And Marcus? He unraveled. Stripped of respect, he drowned himself in alcohol. He stumbled through the lanes, his once pristine shirt stained, his hair unkempt, his eyes bloodshot. He stopped showing up to his accounting work, and when he did, his ledgers were riddled with mistakes. One morning, news spread that he had miscalculated payroll for the commune, nearly costing the team half its winter rations. That was the last straw. By winter's edge, Marcus Reed was demoted and reassigned to the most remote forest station for manual labor re-education. When I heard the news, I sat quietly by the hearth, staring into the crackling fire. In my last life, Marcus had destroyed my family. This time, his ambition destroyed himself. I didn't rejoice. I didn't pity. I simply let go. Life with Lucas settled into rhythm. Our small courtyard house was modest, its walls patched, its gate squeaking on its hinges. But when he planted a young pear tree in the center of the yard, it became something more. It'll bloom next spring, he said, his hand steady as he packed the soil around its roots. And when it does, I'll hang a swing for you. I smiled, touched by the simple promise. It was a kind of happiness I had never known before. Not grand, not gilded, but real. Every weekend Lucas and I rode bicycles to the river. He fished, his sleeves rolled to his elbows while I sat on a stone with a book. Villagers passing by would greet us with newfound respect. Deputy Director Ward, they'd say, nodding. Technician Bennett, they'd add with a smile. It was strange being greeted with honor instead of pity. Strange but sweet. At night, when the world fell quiet, I rested in Lucas's arms. The steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my ear was more comforting than any lullaby. Sometimes I thought back to the icy river, to the moment he pulled me out. Life had given me a second chance. Not so I could drown in revenge, but so I could meet the man willing to leap into freezing waters for me. Spring came, and with it the pear tree blossomed. White petals unfurled under the sun, delicate as silk. True to his word, Lucas strung a wooden swing beneath its branches. The first time I sat on it, the wind tugged my veil back, scattering blossoms into my hair. Lucas pushed me gently, his hands firm on the ropes. Do you like it? He asked. I laughed, the sound light and unburdened. It's perfect. Children from the village peeked through the gate, wide-eyed at the sight of the swing. Lucas waved them in, and soon the courtyard rang with laughter as little ones took turns, their shrieks echoing like bells. For the first time our home felt alive. Not just walls and a roof, but a place where happiness rooted itself, just like the pear tree. Yet sometimes, in the still of the night, I thought of Marcus. I imagined him in the forest station, calloused hands swinging an axe, his face drawn with regret. And I thought of Ivy, broken in body and spirit, confined to a bed somewhere far away. Once their fates had ruled mine. Once I had been their victim. Not anymore. Now they were ghosts of another life. I chose not to hate them. Hatred was a chain, and I had cut my chains. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the pear blossoms drifted like snow, Lucas held me close under the tree. Nora, he said softly, his eyes steady on mine, do you ever regret it? Choosing me. I laughed gently, brushing a blossom from his shoulder. You still think I chose you? Lucas, you chose me first, when you pulled me from that river. His lips curved into the faintest smile. Then we chose each other. I leaned against his chest, breathing in the scent of soap and spring air. And for the first time across 2 lives I felt whole. A book. When I looked back at the path that had brought me here, the icy river, the betrayal, the humiliation, the trap at the grain yard, I realized every step had led me to this moment. The pear tree swayed gently in the evening breeze, its blossoms glowing in the moonlight. Lucas's arms wrapped around me, strong and steady. Life had not treated me unfairly after all. It had given me a rare and precious gift. Not wealth. Not status. But peace. And a man who would dive into the deepest river just to keep me alive. The end.